The man opens his eyes in the middle of a lake with a red drone flying overhead. Visions of his family, spaceships, and shootouts flash before him. Finally gathering himself, the man swims towards the shore, accompanied by the drone, which he calls Ezra, to check his mental health. Suddenly cries for help echo from the lake, and another man, followed by a woman, appears. None of them remembers what happened to them. Fina recognizes the wreckage on the shore as the remnants of a warship called Karik, and Ezra recalls an invasion. Then the men discover the remnants of a car that must have been there for centuries. Apparently, there used to be a road in this place. People remember the invasion, and it turns out they all died in different years. Moreover, Abram confesses that he is 67 years old, although he looks 25. According to the red drone, they were brought back to life in their prime years. Their memories are different because they died at different times. Around them is Earth, but 400 years after the extinction of humanity, destroyed by aliens. They were resurrected by creatures living in the water, called sparks. The ultimate goal is the revival of humanity, and the rest of the information can be found in the settlement where the others who have returned live. The drone orders Ezra to collect the sparks. Gathering their meager belongings, the people set off after the drone, trying to understand why the Kariks revived them. Soon they find partially destroyed arches, and Abram rushes to them, rejoicing in his young, strong body. On one of the structures, he sees unknown hieroglyphics and touches them. The man is thrown back, and he admits that he saw everything. Suddenly, the red drone is shot down, and a second shot wounds Abram. The trio runs behind a hill where Ezra, setting up an ambush, captures the pursuer. The man, named Jax, denies the existence of the settlement. The glowing substance on his neck is a skin rider, which is one with the human body. He needs the sparks, but Fina confidently demonstrates her proficiency with a weapon. Abram insists that when he touched the unknown symbols on the arch, he felt the vastness of outer space. But this elicits mockery from Jax, who suddenly frees himself and lunges at Ezra. However, Fina points his own weapon at him. This time they tie the man securely and leave, despite his claim to know Ezra's brother. Soon the team takes shelter in a cave, while others with glowing parasites on their necks are found, including Ezra's brother Silas. Meanwhile, the resurrected people in the cave discuss ways to recreate a human being and wonder where the aliens obtained the initial material. During the night, Abram's wound becomes inflamed. He is lowered into a small pond where the sparks are released. By morning, Abram emerges completely healthy. Fina discusses what happened to Ezra, as she doesn't understand why they chose her out of millions of great people. Soon the resurrected individuals see high walls of a settlement in the distance, but on their way, skin riders with glowing necks catch up to them. Ezra stays behind to delay the pursuit. He manages to do so for a while until he recognizes his brother Silas among them. In the meantime, Fina and Abram reach the settlement's walls, and just when it seems they are destined to be captured, the gates open. A yellow drone neutralizes the skin riders and lets the fugitives inside. It then flies after Ezra, carrying him through the air into the settlement where there's no one around. In response to all their questions, the drone invites them to follow and shows them rows of graves where the settlers rest. Later, the yellow drone opens the doors of an abandoned military base for the people where the previous settlers lived. In the forest, skin riders capture a man who escaped from them. Silas discovers that the glowing creature they call companions has inexplicably stopped functioning in Duncan's neck and promises to fix it. The resurrected individuals learn that the settlers died from a new virus that still spreads throughout the region. The yellow drone asks them to release the sparks into a vessel with water and learns from them that the sparks can create a vaccine if people bring the ingredients found in the living lake. Fina begins to bleed from her nose, and she stays at the base while the men go to the lake. She takes on the task of repairing the damaged red drone. On their way, Ezra tries to understand how the system that brought them back to life works. The drone operates on sparks, but who controls the sparks is unknown. The men reach the lake and release the sparks into the water to collect the necessary ingredients. In the settlement, Ezra's wife Lynn suddenly appears before Fina. She explains that she worked as a nurse during the invasion and can offer help, but then disappears just as suddenly. On the lake's shore, Ezra confesses that one of the skin riders is his brother, meaning these people are also resurrected. He recalls the moment when he first saw the alien spaceship flying overhead and signaled to his brother that he was a worthless, spoiled child. Now he is determined to apologize and try to retrieve Silas. Meanwhile, a hologram of Lynn appears again to Fina, helping her repair the red drone. In the meantime, the yellow drone warns of the approaching skin riders. Ezra asks Abram to run while he himself tries to intercept his brother Silas. However, he gets surrounded and subdued. Regaining consciousness, he finds himself alone with his brother, who admits that he prohibited forcibly transforming him into a skin rider because he wants his brother to join them voluntarily. Each skin rider has a companion on their neck, which teaches the person how to behave correctly and telepathically connects them with others. Thanks to the companion, Silas is now the leader and mentor for the others, whereas in the previous world, he was nobody. Then Silas suddenly falls asleep, signaling Ezra to leave. Ezra meets Abram in the forest, to whom he explains his intention to save his brother. The men return to the lake, where the Sparks have created 3 vaccine capsules for them. After consuming their doses, they bring the third one to Fina, whose condition worsens. Lynn asks the red drone to replace her image with someone dear to the girl, and Duncan appears next to Fina. Fina regains consciousness after her friends administer the vaccine. The next day, Abram finds a room that is blocked, revealing a glowing obelisk. Meanwhile, in the forest, Silas argues with Duncan about the purpose of the companion controlling the thoughts of the skin riders in the community because Silas believes it amounts to slavery. In the settlement, Abram learns to read hieroglyphs and understands that the unknown hosts offered to dig up weapons against the skin riders in the forest in exchange for more people for the settlement. Ezra goes to the forest for the excavation. Meanwhile, Silas brings Duncan to an open area where Jax conducts training fights, taunting regular people. Unexpectedly, Duncan defeats Jax. Silas stops the duel and explains that he tested his theory, revealing that humans react faster by a fraction of a second than skin riders. Currently, Duncan has a weak companion, so he makes decisions with just one brain, the human one. In contrast, skin riders with healthy companions have a signal that passes through 2 brains, the humans and the companions, causing a slight delay. The conclusion is that humans will always outperform them in combat. To gain an advantage over humans, Silas plans to perform brain surgery to reduce the signal delay. However, a working drone and a test subject are required for this. In the meantime, the yellow drone brings Ezra to the excavation site, which the skin riders immediately learn about. Ezra unearths an item that the yellow drone calls a weapon. In the settlement, Abram, upon touching the obelisk, suddenly realizes that he understands the meaning of the hieroglyphs on it. However, he doesn't yet grasp what this knowledge entails. In the forest, the yellow drone warns Ezra about the approaching skin riders. They attempt to flee, but the skin riders surround them and take the unearthed weapon. Unexpectedly, the weapon activates and kills one of the skin riders. Taking advantage of the chaos, Ezra scatters the rest and escapes. Meanwhile, Fina tries to find out from the red drone why the unknown beings are resurrecting humanity. She requests the revival of Duncan, unaware that he has already been resurrected and has become a skin rider. Ezra brings the weapon meant to eliminate skin riders to the obelisk, hoping it will help establish contact. However, he refuses to kill the innocent inhabitants until the obelisk explains who they are and what is happening. The drones controlled by the obelisk promise to resurrect Ezra's family if he obeys them in all matters. Ezra has no choice but to comply. Later that night, Fina goes to the obelisk, where she finds Ezra, who, like her, hopes for the return of loved ones. They notice that the weapon unearthed in the forest has opened. The obelisk issues new symbols, instructing Fina to go to the lake to receive new people. However, skin riders spot her on the way. As for Abram, the drone tells him about the structure of the glowing companion on the necks of the skin riders, which is tightly connected to the human brain through a crystalline structure. The weapon found in the forest destroys these crystals, eliminating the parasite. When a skin rider dies, its memory is preserved on the crystal, which is passed down to its ancestor. This is what needs to be found and destroyed. Fina sees Lynn emerging from the lake and helps her get ashore. When Jax appears on the shore, the red drone neutralizes him. The girls attempt to escape but are captured by Duncan, who seizes the red drone and fails to recognize Fina, his beloved from the past. The girls try to flee, but Lynn injures her leg and orders Fina to go to the settlement and fetch her husband. Lynn, on the other hand, falls into the hands of the skin riders, who return her to the lake. There, Jax shows how the sparks work, healing her injured leg. But suddenly a stone hits Jax's head, and an unknown little wild girl takes Lynn to her forest dwelling, providing her with shoes and food. However, it turns out the girl cannot speak. During this time, Fina reaches the base and informs Ezra about the resurrection of his wife Lynn. Despite the Yellow Drone's warning that when Skin Riders take someone, it's forever, Ezra is determined to rescue her. Jax finds the little wild girl's home, but she has already taken Lynn away. They hide in the forest. At the same time, Ezra contemplates how to disable the force field since the obelisk prevents him from doing so, leaving him unable to leave the gates. Fina admits that she saw Duncan, who is also with the Skin Riders now, and he didn't recognize her. She fears the same will happen to Lynn. Meanwhile, in the forest, Jax tracks the runaways and explains that even the Sparks make mistakes, resulting in flawed individuals. He is ready to destroy the little girl, but Lynn persuades him not to do it. At the same time, Silas extracts the crystal companion from the deceased Skin Rider's neck and instructs one of the women to take it to the ancestor. Then, they bring Lynn to him. As for Abram, while communicating with the obelisk, he suddenly surmises that he had lived in this settlement before, which is confirmed by a notebook he found with his own handwriting. Later, Fina speculates that they all have lived here before. The Yellow Drone confirms this fact and leads Abram to a graveyard where he shows everyone who is buried there, including Ezra's grave. It turns out that he had also been resurrected and lived in the settlement at one point. Then the Yellow Drone guides Abram to the next grave where he finds himself and encourages him to start a new life honorably. Fina demands that the man bind himself. He agrees but suddenly snatches a weapon from Fina and stuns the Skin Rider standing behind her. At the same time in the bunker, Abram is trying to find out from Yellow where the progenitor is located. However, she does not know, but Jax knows, and he heads to the bottomless lake, dives into it, and emerges in a cave. Meanwhile, Silas is trying to convince Ezra that life in his community is much better than in the bunker. Fina begins to trust Duncan and agrees with his plan. And in the camp, Lynn's escape is discovered. Duncan immediately receives a message about this from other Skin Riders and agrees with Fina's plan to send them on a false trail to enter the camp and save Ezra. The pursuit heads in another direction. Silas demonstrates to his brother the capabilities that a companion gives to the human body. He dips his hand into a vessel with sparks and explains that they cannot kill a companion as it goes against their principles. So if Ezra wants to kill the companion, he will have to kill the person. Fina and Duncan infiltrate the camp and seize the Skin Rider's weapons, and Jax reaches the ancestors' dwelling place. He asks them to explain how the drone works, and several human figures come out to him. Fina and Duncan find Lynn. The girl explains that after being infected by the parasite, she immediately plunged her hand into the sparks and it seems to have helped. Duncan asks the women to leave while he finds Ezra. The ancestors show Jax how the drone works. And in the bunker, Yellow confesses to Abram that not a human lies in one of the graves. Silas proves to Ezra that the obelisk is no better than a companion, as it also subjugates people. He lets slip that all of them, including his brother's wife and daughter, once lived in the settlement. Their conversation is interrupted by Duncan, who, under threat of arms, takes Ezra and leads the group to the settlement by a shortcut. But the protective barrier detecting a companion in Duncan does not let him pass, unlike Lynn. Then Fina ties his hands. But at that moment, the pursuit led by Silas bursts onto the clearing. Duncan pushes Fina behind the barrier, and they with Ezra prepare to fight. Abram runs to the obelisk, and it lets the men through on the condition that Duncan remains in the yard until they figure out how to free him from the parasite. At the same time, the ancestors express concern about Jax's hatred for humans, as they are much better carriers than Kariks, and they advise him to find a compromise. Meanwhile, Duncan confesses that his companion is still weak, but he is gaining strength. He remembers the settlers and confirms that Kylie is alive. Sparks rejuvenate people in the prime of life, but children at the age of their actual death. He also lost a wife and a child, and it was Fina, although the woman does not remember this. Abram explains that they are another generation of the revived. The first one lies in the graves, and they are them too. Jax reprograms the red drone, refusing everything human that was in its memory. Fina unties her husband, but when she falls asleep, Duncan's companion receives a signal from Silas, and he heads to the bunker. There, Abram confesses to Ezra that the drone showed him the memory of another woman he saw a year before the invasion. It feels like someone knew about the invasion and offered people help. He wants to consult with Yellow, but she is nowhere to be found. This happens because Duncan is just locking the drone behind one of the panels. Then he attacks Abram, knocks him out, and heads to the obelisk, despite his human side resisting it. He screams in frustration and Ezra hears him. He runs to him, but Duncan closes the doors and enters symbols that deactivate the force field. Realizing this, Ezra rushes to Fina and they manage to barricade the bunker doors. Duncan's companion comes out in the open and confesses that all this was done for the sake of the weapon he hid. He is ready to reveal where Kylie is now if they hand over the bunker to the Skin Riders. The man is tied up. Outside, the sounds of banging are heard, Skin Riders trying to break down the door. Through Duncan, Silas offers to hand over the bunker. Then he will say where Ezra's daughter is now, because someone from the first settlement managed to avoid death from disease. A debate ensues, resulting in a decision to deactivate the parasite using Lynn's medical knowledge. Jax returns. He expresses his dissatisfaction to Silas as he could have infected Ezra long ago, but lets him go. Silas cuts off the conversation and orders to continue working on the drone. At this time in the bunker, Lynn tries to figure out how the companion works, and it confesses that it can cause great pain to its master. Ezra and Abram conclude that the settlement existed for at least 10 years, and there must be survivors, otherwise, who buried the fallen. Moreover, Yellow said that a drone is buried in one of the graves. At that moment, the knocking at the door resumes. Ezra remembers that there is electricity in the bunker. Fina digests the cable, and a strong electric shock destroys one of the Skin Riders. At the same time, Abram finds Yellow. Simultaneously, people realize that Duncan is acting as a transmitter, and they move him to another room. As they part, Ezra asks to tell his brother that he loves and believes in him. This message puzzles Silas. Yellow scans Duncan and discovers that the parasite has affected all human organs, and even the sparks cannot save him. Abram tries to get answers from the obelisk. Moreover, Yellow said that Duncan was given access codes, but by whom? The man again remembers that woman in the hospital. She had a drone, sparks, and symbols of knowledge on her bracelet, so something was known before the invasion. At Ezra's request, Yellow shows the image of the woman, and he recognizes his mother, Eleanor. Meanwhile, Silas prepares to continue breaking down the doors, but something leads him to the cemetery. Jax, following him, reminds him that he is not human and he should not care about the graves, so he intends to start silencing personalities from him. Silas is arrested. At this time in the bunker, Yellow confesses that Eleanor was one of the initiators of the revival of the human race. Duncan is not lying. Kylie was in the settlement, and only he can say where the survivors are now. Duncan's companion is knocked out with a tranquilizer, and the man is tied to a table. While the parasite sleeps, the man comes to and points on the map the direction the survivors went. He advises finding the wild girl and wakes up. After which, Yellow finds the weapon he had hidden earlier. The people notice the silence outside and, opening the doors, kill the sentinels left by the Skin Riders. Making sure that there is no one else in the yard, Ezra and Lynn say goodbye to their friends and set out to find Kylie. Jax activates the drone, intending to remove the human personality from Silas, and learns about the presence of Ezra and Lynn in the forest. He sends the Skin Riders to follow the pair. Fina comes to Duncan and admits that she is ready to kill him to free her loved one. However, Yellow knocks him out. The man regains consciousness in the cemetery and is relieved, thinking that Fina could not bring herself to harm him. In fact, Yellow has injected a beacon into his body, and now people can track his path. At this time, Ezra and Lynn find the wild girl and ask her to guide them to Kylie. Silas regains consciousness when the red drone informs him that he did the opposite, preserved his personality, and suppressed the parasite's capabilities. At the same time, Ezra and Lynn notice they are being followed and try to evade the Skin Riders. However, arrows fly from the rocks, the Skin Riders perish, and the survivors approach the people. Meanwhile, in the camp, Jax leaves Duncan on guard while he and his people follow Ezra and Lynn. They are then scanned for safety, and upon confirmation, the settlement leader Rowan leads them into the camp. She warns them that they do not truly know their daughter. They only remember her up to the age of 6, and they are merely copies of those who lived in the settlement. Abram and Fina dig up a broken drone from the grave, hoping to retrieve data from its memory. Rowan brings Ezra and Lynn to the hidden camp in the mountain caves. Noticing the strange expressions on people's faces, she explains that they both died defending the previous camp from an attack. If it weren't for Lynn, no one would have survived. Silas killed the woman. Fina connects Yellow to the memory of the broken drone, and she promises to show the events of the past. At the camp, Ezra and Lynn's adult daughter arrives. Although she understands what they feel, she refuses to recognize them as her parents. Red notices that Silas is experiencing severe pain. He flies to Duncan, and at that moment in the camp, a bloody Justin appears, who orders him to take the rest of the people and rush to the place where they were ambushed. He carries out the order, and Jax disappears because it was a hologram created by Red. Silas escapes. The real Jax finds the ambush site and orders a search of the rocks. In the bunker, Yellow transports Fina and Abram into a virtual reality of the past settlement where people go about their daily activities. Jax enters the gates and explains that Silas developed a growth on his neck, after which he attacked his friends. All this happened near the old Karrick ship. Returning to their reality, the people realize that this was the first case of companion infection. Yellow explains that the parasites create a structure similar to fungal spores. Silas likely inhaled them. The parasites themselves were brought by the Karricks, who were their carriers before humans. Meanwhile, a boy from the survivors, Thomas, carelessly falls into the hands of Justin. Silas begins to experience severe pain. Red tries to alleviate his condition and notices Duncan rushing towards the bunker. Apparently, he has discovered his escape and wants to detain Silas. Red leads him another way. At the same time, Thomas learns that he has been infected with the parasite. At the camp, his absence is noticed. Rowan calls a council and Ezra advises them to flee. If Thomas reveals the camp, they will not survive. Yellow shows how Abram proposed to create a virus capable of killing the parasite, although the idea itself belongs to the obelisk. People heatedly discuss this proposal, and many disagree. Lynn suggests splitting up. Those who take the virus should stay in the bunker, as they will be weakened. Rowan speaks against it. Abram realizes that he was the cause of the remaining deaths. In the caves, Ezra urges everyone to leave while he defends them. At this time, Silas reaches the bunker and sees Duncan sitting by a campfire. He lures him into the workshop and locks him in there. Abram is overwhelmed with guilt, runs to the obelisk, and voices his accusations. Suddenly, it creates the image of a second Abram, who says that on the other side of the obelisk are creators who sincerely believed they were saving the settlement. The virus just turned out to be slower than the parasite cells. The second Abram disappears as voices of Ezra and Lynn come from behind the doors. Fina opens the doors, and friends push Silas inside. They immediately disappear as they were holograms created by Red. Silas asks to be heard. The drone supports this request and reports that they cannot destroy the ancestor without Silas. At this point, the boy loses consciousness, and they bring him inside. Ezra, Lynn, and the young archers set up an ambush, but Thomas appears, shoots at them, and wounds Kylie's fiancé, Nico. Ezra kills the boy, and upon examining, finds a parasite. Lifting his arrow, he realizes there is something on its tip. At that moment, Jax appears with his people and calls them to battle. Red puts Silas into a coma. Meanwhile, Lynn and Kylie bring the injured Nico inside. Justin orders his man to watch the backup entrance to the cave. Lynn starts treating Nico, but the worst part is that the arrow tip might have a parasite larva. The boy then demands to be killed, as Lynn herself set such rules. Duncan tries to call any of the skin riders for help, and Yellow explains to Fina and Abram that the parasite is killing Silas so that he cannot reveal the way to the progenitor. Then Red admits that he can link the minds of Abram and Silas, which might help reveal the secret. At this time, Kylie decides to help her father patrol. The girl recalls the past and calls Jax his best friend, which greatly surprises Ezra. And his urge to kill arises because the parasites are very afraid that the human inside might take over if he remembers his attachments. Father and daughter return to the cave, and Ezra proposes that his wife, daughter, and Nico take another road while he guards them. After heated arguments, they head to the second exit. Abram enters Silas's mind and finds himself in a church. It turns out that the boy's mind considers the church a sanctuary. Abram admits that Silas will no longer come to himself, and he himself describes the way to the lake of the progenitor. The parasites are interconnected precisely through it. It is the source of their energy, strength, and knowledge. Silas knows for sure humanity will not survive if the lake does not disappear. Ezra resorts to trickery, and Kylie kills a lurking skin rider. The father bids farewell to everyone and stays in the cave. At the same time, Abram and Fina develop a plan to destroy the progenitor. Yellow explains that the weapon consists of 3 parts. 2 of these are standalone weapons, capable of operating independently of each other. However, the top part is dangerous for humans themselves, so it is discarded. Only the lower part remains, which destroys the progenitor. But this part will not work without the middle, where a human personality must be placed. But the progenitor has studied all the skin riders in this world, so the chances of getting into it are slim. And then Abram realizes why Silas was needed. Later, Fina reflects on her promise to Duncan to kill him and free him from the parasite. Then, Yellow admits that her husband is in the workshop in the yard. The woman arms herself and heads to the yard, but just as she is ready to open the door to the workshop, a skin rider enters the yard and releases Duncan. Fina tries to stop the men, but Duncan reminds her that she cannot kill him and leaves. At this time, Abram comes to Silas again and explains that they need his help. Jax decides to attack, realizing that Ezra is the only defender of the camp. He orders his men to engage him while he himself follows the trail of Lynn, Kylie, and Nico. Nico is losing strength, and Lynn decides to make a stretcher, although the boy asks to just leave him. And Ezra sets up an ambush and one by one eliminates the skin riders, then follows the trail of his wife. Nico transforms and grabs Lynn by the throat. He is ready to kill the woman, but Kylie interferes. The boy's companion admits that the girl is very dear to him, but he cannot indulge the carrier's weaknesses, and when Nico raises his sword, Kylie shoots him. Ezra catches up with them, not knowing that Jax is monitoring their reunion, but he receives a message about Silas's betrayal, and Jax leaves. Silas asks Abram to wait for his death, take his crystal, and insert it into the weapon. Then he will be in the middle part and can help. Abram does not fully understand how it works, but thanks Silas. They say goodbye. Abram comes to his senses when Silas dies, and Jax catches up with Duncan and his men by the lake. After a dispute, he orders everyone to stay in ambush, and he and Duncan will dive to the progenitor. Meanwhile, Lynn and Ezra bury Nico and console their daughter. Simultaneously, Fina and Abram bury Silas. Later, the groups meet, unaware that a black drone is watching them, which takes off above the earth and heads for a spacecraft. Abram tells Ezra everything that happened with his brother and the plan to destroy the progenitor, but he does not want to endanger his family. Yellow vaccinates Kylie, explaining that the vaccine was made by Sparks. The girl tells Fina that Duncan became a skin rider after her death, and no one knows how it happened. At the same time, Abram admits that he no longer believes in the obelisk, but he believes in Silas and is ready to do everything to destroy the progenitor. He tells Ezra about the weapon's operation. A part of Silas will guide them inside, but what to do next, he doesn't know. Ezra laughs at such a plan, and his daughter hears this. Abram and Fina try to convince Ezra that this is why they were resurrected. Otherwise, humanity is doomed. But they cannot persuade him. Then Abram and Fina leave together. Ezra is tormented by guilt, although Lynn tries to remind him of his duty to his family. At this time, Kylie is reviewing the map to the progenitor's lake and secretly leaves the bunker. Red informs the parents that he cannot find the girl, and they, realizing where she has gone, rush after her. Meanwhile, Kylie catches up with Fina and Abram, and later Ezra and Lynn appear. Thus they all come together again. But at the lake itself, they fall into an ambush by the skin riders. A battle ensues in which the group of survivors wins, but Abram is seriously wounded. However, Kylie has Sparks with her, and she suggests releasing them into the lake. As they start doing this, Duncan emerges from the water and shoots Lynn and Kylie. Fina, under the cover of a shield, rushes to him, and they both disappear under the water. Ezra releases the Sparks and brings the wounded into the water. Then a wounded Fina emerges, saying she couldn't overcome Duncan. Ezra dives and finds a wounded Duncan, who has reverted to his true self before death. He apologizes and loses consciousness, and Ezra sees in front of him a glowing something with crystals and fits the lower part of the weapon onto one of them. Then he inserts Silas's little crystal into the middle part of the weapon and looks for the place where it needs to be placed. But then Jax appears. He has always hated his carrier and all humans, and he will not let the progenitor be destroyed. The men engage in combat, and just as Jax is about to win, the revived Duncan attacks him. Ezra finds the right crystal and fits the middle part of the weapon onto it, and suddenly finds himself in a room where he is met by Silas. The brother explains that they are inside the progenitor, and only he could create this home in this place. He is a Trojan horse from which destruction will enter the progenitor. Ezra picks up the box with the symbol of knowledge from his mother and realizes that it is a detonator. The brother says goodbye to him, and when Jax appears, they activate the bomb. Ezra finds himself in the cave where the progenitor is destroyed, to Jax's great sorrow. The man emerges and finds his loved ones healed. Their elation is washed by a black drone, which again heads to the spaceship, where it is met by Eleanor and Duncan. They realize that the deed is done and humanity has a chance. Despite some illogicality, the story is quite extraordinary. It's not about battles with aliens, as the Kariks are only briefly shown once in a flashback, and not about humans' attempts to cunningly escape the dictate of their rule. At the heart is the question of the value of a person, the preservation of which can lead to peace and the rebuilding of civilization. The spaceship is on a mission to Titan, one of Saturn's moons. Astronaut John wakes up in the hibernation capsule. He feels weak after the long sleep. The drugs have many side effects and John needs some time to recover. He is greeted by the ship's captain, Franks. The captain orders John to take a shower and then come up to the bridge to discuss the next steps. Besides Captain Franks, John is met by his colleague Nash. Together the men watch a message from the Mission Control Center and receive new instructions. They are to conduct routine equipment checks and prepare for gravitational acceleration. John tries to pull himself together, but this time he feels worse. He struggles to eat and confesses to Nash that he can't remember the last name of Zoe, his girlfriend. By evening, John manages to check all the equipment. He records a response message to Mission Control, reports the situation, and prepares for another hibernation cycle, which will last 3 more months. A special substance is injected into the astronaut's bloodstream, and his eyes slowly close. Memories from the past wash over him, and for the next 3 months, he is deep in sleep. The awakening process is routine, with John experiencing the usual symptoms as he waits for his body to recover. After a hearty meal, the astronaut spends some time on the exercise bike, preparing for work, but unexpectedly he hears a familiar voice. It seems like Zoe's voice came from somewhere nearby. John steps into the corridor and walks through the empty spaceship. No one else has woken up from deep sleep yet, and John feels uneasy. His fear intensifies when part of the ship's hull above him starts to come loose. John tries to figure out what's wrong, but a piece of metal breaks off and knocks him unconscious. Captain Franks and Nash lay their injured colleague down and provide medical assistance. As soon as John feels better, the captain orders him to go to the technical compartment and figure out what caused the malfunction. Under the hull, John finds significant damage and a strange giant dent, but the footage Nash reviews from the cameras provides no answers. No objects approached the ship in the past few hours. Moreover, the dent hasn't caused any serious problems. All systems are still functioning normally. Captain Franks leaves his subordinates and orders them to report the situation to Earth. He himself heads to the site of the damage for another inspection. Nash tries to convince the captain to abort the mission and return to Earth, but Franks refuses to break protocol. There's no serious reason to do so, as all systems are still operating smoothly. The astronauts gather to make a joint decision, but the conflict only escalates. Nash starts panicking, insisting that continuing the mission is too dangerous, but the captain remains firm. Unless new orders come from Mission Control, they will continue toward Titan. Nash then tries to persuade John to act together. He's convinced the system will eventually fail, and by then, they won't have the chance to save themselves and return to Earth. Their conversation is interrupted by the captain, who calls them to the bridge. He admits that he overheard everything Nash said and doesn't appreciate his attempts to stir up panic. Franks tries to calm Nash down, reminding him of the consequences they'll face for disobeying orders and advising them to focus on their duties. Despite the captain's orders, Nash continues to urge John. He asks him to set the hibernation cycle for 89 days instead of 90 so they can wake up earlier than the captain and reverse course back to Earth. John doesn't like his friend's idea and doesn't want to be part of a mutiny, but when Nash tells him about another ship destroyed by poor leadership decisions, John agrees to think it over and give an answer after they wake up. John falls asleep again, recalling happy moments with Zoe, but this time the cycle is much shorter than usual. Nash demands an answer from his friend so they can quickly turn the ship around and head for Earth, but John remains uncertain. He realizes that his mind is clouded, and making important decisions in this state isn't wise. Jupiter appears outside the window, strengthening John's doubts. They are so close to their destination. This drives Nash over the edge, and a loud argument breaks out between the men. Captain Franks watches the whole scene. Having learned of his subordinates' plans, he also altered his sleep schedule and woke up earlier to prevent the mutineers from disrupting the mission. Franks sends Nash to check the systems again to make sure everything is in order. While the saboteur is gone, the captain invites John for a drink to gauge the astronaut's mood. The commander assures John that he'll cancel the mission if it's necessary, but for now they must stick together and follow orders. Nash's derailed plans push him to the brink of insanity. He causes a scene and Franks decides to relieve him of his duties and proceed with acceleration without him. John tries to stay out of the conflict and pretends that everything is fine, but the breach in the hull continues to trouble him, and he often has nightmares where it pulls him into the vacuum of space. Despite his concerns, John ignores Nash's pleas and heads to the bridge to prepare for the acceleration. The team gets ready to approach Jupiter. John sets the coordinates and sequentially activates the powerful engines that will take them to Titan. The acceleration is successful, and the ship enters the orbit that will guide them to Titan. But Nash still believes it's a serious mistake. John isn't entirely sure they made the right choice either, but he tries to keep himself busy to avoid dwelling on it. He decides to check the equipment again, and something strange happens. One of the radios transmits an unknown signal. The crew tries to come up with an explanation, both insisting that John must have accidentally pressed a button. To end the discussion, Franks orders the astronauts to prepare for another hibernation cycle. This time, exiting hibernation becomes a real challenge. John collapses to the floor, completely drained. He tries to recover, but while his body regains strength, his mind suffers greatly. He keeps seeing visions of Zoe everywhere. Captain Franks notices his subordinate's strange condition. He tells John to get a grip and realize that it's all just his imagination. Zoe is not, and cannot be, on the ship. Nash discovers the first signs of trouble. The reactor's power output begins to rise. He's not sure if it's connected to the hull breach, but if it continues, the ship's engine might fail. Nash again urges his friend to listen to him and turn the ship around. He reminds John of Zoe, saying that if they don't return now, she'll quickly find a new boyfriend. Captain Franks overhears the men's conversation once again. He summons them to the bridge for a serious talk. Someone, using Nash's password, deliberately lowered the engine's power to stop the ship. The commander won't tolerate Nash's antics any longer. This time he draws his sidearm to show the mutineer who's in charge on the ship. Franks orders the astronauts to return to their hibernation capsules to prevent any further sabotage. But as John's body starts receiving the drug, he sees what the captain is doing to his colleague. He doesn't have time to stop the crime. His eyes close. Weeks later, when the sleep cycle ends, John tries to figure out if it really happened or if it was just a dream. He steps into the corridor, but none of his colleagues are around. Franks appears suddenly. He assures John that Nash is fine but will remain in hibernation until the mission is over. The captain asks John not to complicate things and behave normally. They need to complete the mission and reach Titan, but if necessary, he'll use his sidearm to prevent further insubordination. To help John relax, Franks tells him the truth about the other ships Nash mentioned. He swears the madman distorted the facts, and in that case the captain wasn't at fault. The crew harmed themselves. John reluctantly admits he was wrong and agrees to continue working together. The captain tasks him with inspecting the equipment and re-establishing contact with Mission Control on Earth. While working, John's arm goes numb, and he tries to examine it himself, but for a moment it seems like the limb swells and turns into a monstrous hand. As soon as the vision disappears, John hears Zoe's voice again, but he realizes this is also a hallucination and doesn't respond to the call. Instead, John decides to discuss the future plans with the captain, but Franks unexpectedly starts talking about John's relationship with his girlfriend. The commander assures him that their romance wasn't real. It was orchestrated to convince John to join the mission. The unpleasant conversation unsettles John, and he heads to the workshop to focus on his tasks. Unpleasant thoughts and memories prevent John from concentrating, but suddenly the radio crackles, and he hears the dispatcher's voice. The astronaut tries to report what's happening, but the connection keeps cutting out and he can't hear a response. Franks summons John to the bridge. He demands to know what John was doing, and upon hearing about the conversation with Houston, the captain insists it was another hallucination. The captain orders John to return to his capsule and go back to sleep, but this time John's nerves snap. He demands that Franks wake Nash up and prove that his friend is okay. Taking advantage of a moment, Franks attacks John and tries to force him into the capsule, but John manages to break free. A fight breaks out between the two men. John is stronger, but he can't win the battle with his mind as easily as with the captain. John reaches the central computer to find out which chamber Nash is in and if he's alive. While entering the request, he has to fend off Franks, but finally, the computer starts searching for the astronaut. The answer John receives leaves him in shock. The program confirms that Nash is alive and on the bridge, just like John and Franks, because all three names belong to the same person, Captain John Franks Nash. John realizes that he's been alone on the ship the entire time. His companions were figments of his imagination caused by the repeated use of hibernation drugs. John loses his last bit of strength and doesn't know what to do next. He returns to the workshop, holding the service pistol. The astronaut tries to contact mission control again, but for a long time the radios remain silent. Finally, one of the radios turns on, and John hears Zoe's voice. She says she's at the ground control center and was invited to speak to him. Zoe confirms John's version. The hibernation drugs were too strong, causing his mind to become confused. But that's not the worst part. The girl tells the astronaut that there's no spaceship. All this time he's been part of a different experiment and deep underground. The planets and stars he saw through the window were just a simulation, as was the sensation of flying. But the impact was real. An earthquake hit the surface, partially collapsing the tunnel. Zoe asks her fiancé to gather his strength and help them rescue him. To do that, John needs to depressurize the cargo bay and leave the ship. She assures him that outside, there's an underground corridor leading to the surface. Captain Franks reappears behind John, trying to stop him. He claims that Zoe's voice is just another hallucination, and the story about underground tunnels and earthquakes is a fantasy his mind made up to explain the situation. Franks tells John that if he depressurizes the cargo bay, all that awaits outside is the vacuum of space, which will pull him out and end his life. John hesitates briefly, but Zoe's voice gives him strength. He doesn't listen to the captain and opens the airlock. At first it seems like Zoe was right. John finds himself in a shaft and hears her voice nearby. He walks toward the light, hoping to soon reach the surface, but space engulfs the astronaut's body and carries him into the infinite void. Or was that a hallucination too? That's how the movie ends. Los Angeles, October 6th. For Mark Benford, the day begins as usual. After kissing his wife and young daughter Charlie goodbye, the FBI agent prepares for work and meets Nicole, the young nanny who looks after the girl. Olivia is also getting ready for her shift at the nearby clinic, but before leaving, she dials the number of her assistant, Bryce. However, at that moment, he arrives at the pier, intending to take his own life. At work, Mark and his partner Dimitri begin surveillance of a suspect. When the woman is joined by accomplices, the agents start a pursuit. The suspects notice the surveillance, leading to a high-speed chase. At the pier, Bryce prepares to pull the trigger, while the entire city remains unaware of what is about to happen. Mark takes a sharp turn, and something strange happens. His entire life flashes before his eyes. In this vision, the agent sees a board with clues and connections, and then he hides from bandits who have come after him. Coming to his senses, Mark realizes that he wasn't the only one who blacked out. Chaos ensues around him. Hundreds of cars have collided, and people are frantically trying to find help. The agents spot the suspect's car and head towards it. Only the woman remains alive, but she babbles something nonsensical about frightened horses. Mark leaves Dimitri by the car and rushes to his wife to check on her. As he runs through the streets, he realizes the situation is much more serious. The blackout affected the entire city and caused widespread destruction. Olivia informs her husband that hundreds of injured people are being brought to the hospital. She ends the call and attends to a patient, a boy involved in an accident. Amazingly, the teenager recognizes Olivia and calls her by name. At the bureau, the staff is urgently gathered, and Stan Wadek reports the first piece of information. People around the world lost consciousness. It is evident that millions of people died because of the blackout. But Mark is concerned about something else. He admits that he didn't just lose consciousness. During that time, it felt as though he was transported 6 months into the future, to April 29th, and he clearly saw what would happen to him on that day. His colleagues support him, and everyone shares their visions. Only Dimitri remains silent. During the blackout, he saw nothing. Mark and Dimitri organize a board to collect clues, and Benford recognizes it as the one from his vision. He mentions a name that stuck with him, D. Gibbons. According to him, this name is where the investigation should begin. Olivia hesitates, but eventually decides to tell her husband about her vision. She saw herself happy, but with another man. Mark convinces himself that it might just be an illusion, but his vision starts to come true that same evening. Charlie gives her father a bracelet that he saw on his wrist. Olivia has to take Charlie to the clinic so she won't be left alone, while she revives her daughter's favorite toy, Lloyd, the father of the injured boy. Dylan enters the room. The doctor is horrified to recognize Lloyd as the man from her vision, but he doesn't recognize her. In his memory, he didn't see his companion's face because he was always turned away. Meanwhile, the agents return to work, and unexpectedly, Dee Gibbons herself comes to the bureau. It turns out she is a religious woman who brings the agents cupcakes and doesn't understand what role she is supposed to play in the global blackout. The agents check Dee Gibbons and find out that on the day of the catastrophe, someone else with the same name used her credit card. Without delay, the agents fly to Utah, where they are met by Sheriff Keeban. During the conversation, the young woman mentions that she, like Dimitri, saw nothing during the blackout, and the guy hopes that it was just a peculiarity of some people. While the agents try to find Dee Gibbons, the Bureau studies a strange video. A man who remained conscious was spotted at a baseball stadium. Mark notices an abandoned doll factory, and recalling an image from his vision, suggests checking the building. The agents immediately realize that someone is inside the factory, but they fail to remain unnoticed. An alarm goes off, and hundreds of dolls begin to sing. Mark and Dimitri find the suspect, but they don't see his face. The psychopath utters a strange phrase and throws a lit lighter. Sheriff Keeban dies from shrapnel injuries. Dimitri understands that his fear is not unfounded. He didn't see his future because that day will not come for him. Checking Dee Gibbons' phone yields results. The unknown person called an unidentified guy from the stadium. Hawk tells Dimitri about her vision. The girl saw herself pregnant in an ultrasound room. Following her colleague's advice, she decides to post her vision on the website that the FBI created to collect memories. Noah decides to follow suit. He also posts his information on the Mosaic website, stating that he saw nothing. The guy's inquiry is answered that same evening. An unknown woman calls from a hidden number and says she saw an intelligence report. According to it, the agent will die on March 15th, a maximum security prison in Germany. One of the inmates, Rudolf Geyer, strolls through the yard chatting with a guard about the blackout. That same day, Mark receives a message from the old man. He knows what caused the blackout, but will only tell Agent Benford in person. Dimitri meets Zoe, his fiancée. The girl happily tells him that in her vision she saw their wedding in Hawaii, and the agent begins to hope that he can change his fate. Mark gets permission for a trip to Munich. He meets with the old man, but Geyer promises to reveal the truth only if he is deported to the US and all charges against him are dropped. Dimitri meets the customs officer from Geyer's vision, and he confirms the old man's memories. The old prisoner gets his way. He receives a pardon, but when it comes to his testimony, it turns out that he only knows about the dead crows and that it is somehow connected to the scriptures. Benford hopes that the old man's words will be of some use. He asks Hawk to check all cases of mass bird deaths. The agents manage to find out that a similar incident was recorded in Somalia many years ago. Mark asks to be sent to Somalia, but after the failure in Germany, the agent's request is denied. Then Benford asks Al to contact a former suspect in a hacking case to help him obtain the necessary information. Meanwhile, Dimitri returns to interrogate the girl they were tailing on the day of the blackout. The guy is sure she knows what happened, but she insists that the agents are looking in the wrong place and that Dimitri should hurry, as he has little time left. Despite Olivia's request to transfer Dylan, he is kept in the ward, but she doesn't even suspect that the boy's father, Lloyd, poses a threat not only to her family. Answering a phone call, Lloyd talks to his accomplice, the one who, together with him, caused the worldwide blackout. The agents are attacked. This prompts the CIA to get involved, and all agents are sent for a polygraph test to determine why someone is now trying to eliminate them. After the interrogation, the government convenes a meeting to decide whether to continue funding the Mosaic project. Stan understands that this is the only way to gather enough information, and they must defend their case. The Senate hearings begin at 10:30 p.m., and the floor is given to Agent Benford. Mark starts to falter in his testimony because he hesitates to tell the truth. In his vision, he was drunk. While Mark struggles, his colleagues find something interesting. In satellite images, they find strange towers in Somalia. Hawk immediately informs Mark of the discovery. After a private conversation with the president, Stan finds his subordinates and tells Mark that they have secured funding. Mark calls Janice to share the good news and to warn her that they will soon return from Washington, but at that moment, the agents are attacked for the second time. In the dining car, a passenger notices an attractive fellow traveler, and to get her attention, he starts talking about the blackout. While he tries to charm the beauty, hoping to lure her to his compartment, Janice Hawk is brought to the hospital in critical condition. Learning about the attack, Olivia tries to call her husband, but soon, he personally appears at the hospital with his colleagues. The agents visit the deceased attackers. Examining the bodies, Dimitri finds a mark on one of them, a blue hand. Mark saw the exact same symbol in his memories, and it was somehow connected to the worldwide blackout. Dr. Simon Campos, the charming guy from the train, gets what he wants, and the girl ends up in his bed, but soon she begins to regret it. The stranger tells her that in his vision, he takes someone's life and enjoys it. Lloyd arranges a party for his son and brings him a Halloween costume. But as soon as the man gets distracted, Dylan leaves. The boy gets on the first bus he finds and makes his way to the right address. Dylan enters the Benford house uninvited, calling it his home. Dimitri finds another blue hand, but this time on a road sign. Following the direction indicated, he sees another marker and continues on. The nanny calls Mark and tells him about the little guest. The man is shocked to learn that Charlie knows the boy well, even though she has never met him before. Lloyd arrives at the house and immediately recognizes it as the one from his vision. Mark also instantly understands who this man is, and when Olivia enters the room, everyone feels awkward. The agents arrive at an abandoned house, which is also marked with a blue hand. Breaking in, they find several bodies with their hands smeared in blue paint. Returning his son to the hospital, Lloyd decides to head home for some rest, but in the backseat of his car, an old acquaintance is waiting. Dr. Simon Campos, the pathologist, informs the agents that all the deceased found in the abandoned house had taken their own lives. Agent Fiona Banks arrives from London at the bureau. Her American colleagues brief her on the Blue Hand ghost community. It consists of those who did not see their future, including all the deceased discovered in the abandoned house. Dressed as ordinary guys, the agents head to the ghost club. But to enter, the guests must play Russian roulette. The agents watch in horror, but when the leader of the movement takes the stage, they reveal themselves and arrest him. During interrogation, Dimitri tries to find out who hired the Blue Hand members that attacked Hawk, but Sunderland refuses to answer any questions, fully aware of what lies ahead. In his vision, Agent Goff heard himself talking to a lawyer. Al confessed to the attorney that he was guilty of the death of a woman named Celia. Tormented by these memories, Goff leaves Dimitri a letter and heads to the roof. To change his fate and avoid being responsible for someone's death, he makes a fateful decision. In his final letter, Al gives hope to everyone who saw something terrible in their visions. He assures people that the future can be changed. Simon finds Lloyd at the hospital, and Lloyd tells his accomplice that he wants to make an official statement and reveal the truth to the world, that they were responsible for the global blackout. Meanwhile, Mark takes his wife to the coast for a romantic weekend, but their relaxation is interrupted by a phone call. Benford is informed that a criminal with star tattoos on his hand has been found, the one Mark saw in his vision. Simon proposes a poker game to his accomplice. If he wins, the secret remains a secret, and no one will know about the blackout. If Lloyd wins, the scientists will make an official statement. Simon is confident that luck will be on his side. Hawk is protecting a witness to a crime involving the criminal with the tattoo. At night, Janice requests help from Dimitri and Benford, and Mark recognizes the person from his vision. Not wanting to take any chances, Mark shoots, once again altering fate and killing the suspect. Lloyd bluffs and wins the game. He refuses the money and asks his accomplice to prepare for the announcement. Janice receives an enhanced image of the first suspect and now manages to see the ring on his hand. This could be the first significant lead. Benford tells his wife that he was able to change everything and eliminate the man with the star tattoos on his hand. But at the same time, somewhere, a new plan is being put into motion, involving another individual with the same tattoo. He delivers a suitcase with rings to an unknown old man. Experts manage to identify the alpha symbol on the ring that belonged to the original suspect. However, no one can yet determine its exact meaning. New information emerges. The NSA discovered that several months ago, a suspicious call was made to Dimitri's phone. Dimitri realizes which call is being referred to and demands that he be given the caller's information, the only way he can prevent his own death. Mark finds a message on his wife's phone about his vision. He tries to figure out which of his friends could have betrayed him, but both Aaron and Stan are outraged by Mark's suspicions and deny any involvement. The agents listen to a recording of the call Dimitri received. They managed to determine that the anonymous woman was in Hong Kong. Despite the boss's orders, Mark informs Dimitri that they are flying to Hong Kong. The agents arrive in Hong Kong, where a local colleague is already waiting for them. Stan is furious that his subordinates disobeyed his orders, but Mark risks his job to save his friend. Lloyd addresses the nation with an official statement. He admits that on the day of the catastrophe, they were conducting secret experiments and takes full responsibility. But listening to the scientist's speech, Mark suspects that the real cause may be hidden elsewhere. Stan demands that the scientist be brought to him for questioning. Hawk remembers that Lloyd's son is still in the hospital, and the boss sends her to speak with him. An unexpected event occurs. Simon Campos himself walks into Stan's office. The scientist insists that he disagrees with his colleague and believes that someone else caused the blackout. He agrees to help with the investigation if the agents grant him access to classified information. Hawk meets Lloyd at the hospital and offers him protection in exchange for information, but Lloyd refuses to cooperate and asks to be left alone. The agents try to locate the woman who called Dimitri. To do so, Mark has to break another rule. He threatens the cafe owner who attempted to withhold the necessary information. Stan shows Simon satellite images that revealed strange towers. The scientist admits that the towers are his invention, a laser designed to accelerate plasma formation. Simon can't understand how this is possible. The technology to create them is still in development. But even more surprising is this: he invented the laser in 1992, but the images were taken in 1991. The agents inform Simon about Dee Gibbons, who probably created these lasers. The scientist promises to help find the person who stole his idea. Lloyd asks the chief physician to transfer Dylan to a safer clinic, but after the announcement, the scientist loses his credibility and the doctor refuses to help him. Then Olivia intervenes. She promises to do everything she can to ensure the boy's safety. Mark and Dimitri find the cafe where the woman who called is having lunch. She allows the agents to sit down, but admits that she regrets making the call, and that their visit might only make things worse. The woman claims that the shooter who will take Dimitri's life will be Benford. As proof, the stranger provides Mark's gun's serial number. Shocked by what he hears, Mark loses his temper and creates a scene. He takes the woman hostage and exits the restaurant. A local FBI agent arrives, and Mark is forced to back down. While Mark is in serious trouble in Hong Kong, Olivia is bonding with Lloyd. The scientist tells her about parallel universes in which they might have been together once. The agents are sent back to the States, and Mark is stripped of his badge. Meanwhile, Dee Gibbons visits the Sears home. Dylan is being prepared for transfer. Lloyd and Olivia bid a warm farewell, but the doctor notices something amiss. The paramedics turn out to be imposters. They open fire on the security detail and, abandoning Dylan, take Lloyd away. Lloyd regains consciousness in a basement, handcuffed. Hawk is tasked with hiding Simon in a safe place where he can continue his work, but those who need him find the agents as soon as they settle into the safe apartment. Dimitri finds Janice unconscious. Meanwhile, Simon is taken to the basement to meet an old friend. The scientists try to understand who and why they were kidnapped, but the answer comes unexpectedly. The same old man who recently received the suitcase with rings arrives in the basement. The kidnapper introduces himself as Flosso. He makes it clear that he won't be gentle, and the hostages should answer his questions precisely. Mark is assigned sessions with a psychotherapist, who helps him recall details from his memories that were previously hidden. Benford remembers that on that night he was talking to Lloyd on the phone. Later, Mark reveals another memory to Aaron. In his conversation with Lloyd, he mentioned a second blackout. Lloyd remains silent, realizing that his revelations could lead to a catastrophe, but Flosso finds a way to make the scientist talk. He has Simon's finger cut off right before Lloyd's eyes. The agents discover where the captive scientists are being held. On the way to the basement, Dimitri calls Janice and asks her to join the operation. Unable to resist any longer, Lloyd tells everything that happened during the experiment, giving Flosso specific details. At that moment, the agents storm the location, but it turns out to be empty. The only thing awaiting the agents is a booby trap. Driving around the city, Mark recalls the map from his visions and realizes where to search for the captives. By this time, Lloyd and Simon are being prepared for execution. The agent crashes into an abandoned store and rescues the scientists. Simon is loaded into an ambulance, but inside, he is met by Flosso. The old man apologizes for the finger and explains that it was to divert suspicion from the boy and to ensure Simon has no desire to rebel. He reminds him that Simon was the initial suspect. Several months earlier, after his father's funeral, unknown individuals took the scientist to a baseball game and ordered him to wear the ring. Thanks to it, he remained conscious while everyone else blacked out. The operation was led by Dee Gibbons. Janice informs Simon that he will be held in custody for some time. The young man stages a spectacle and manages to escape, but not for long. When he arrives in Canada, Hawk is already waiting for him with armed soldiers. Hawk agrees to stay in Canada so that Simon can visit his family. But once again, Simon outsmarts the agent and escapes, despite wearing a special bracelet. Simon heads to a boat owned by an old friend, confident that no one will find him there. However, Hawk beats him to the boat, arriving even before he does. The pair returns to Simon's house, pretending that nothing has happened. The family prepares for dinner, and their Uncle Teddy arrives. Simon opens the door for his relative and is greeted by Flosso. During dinner, a call comes in, and Simon's mother says it's Annabelle, his sister, who left home after the blackout. Flosso prevents Simon from answering the phone and shows him a video. His sister is being held hostage to ensure that Simon doesn't try to escape again. To further demonstrate the seriousness of his intentions, Flosso shows Simon a body in his trunk, the old man from the boat. Fed up with the blackmail, Simon decides to break free. He attacks Flosso and stops his heart. Mark brings Lloyd to his house and asks him to recall everything from his vision. Both men feel uneasy, but the agent knows that this is crucial for his investigation. Dimitri is confident that the Hong Kong woman's prophecy won't come true because he turned in Mark's gun for destruction. But attempts to change the future fail. The gun goes missing. The agents fly to Somalia to inspect the strange structures in person. Simon is part of the expedition, but he is denied a weapon. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Mark informs his boss that he has discovered Dee Gibbons' real name, Dyson Frost, and that somehow he will be connected to Charlie. The team of agents comes under fire. Their guide tries to explain that they are on a humanitarian mission, but this doesn't stop the Somalis who kill the translator. The Somali leader realizes that he's being lied to. He has already seen foreigners arrive and set up the towers many years ago. He locks the visitors up and promises to kill them, one by one. The agents manage to disable the guards and take their weapons. They reach the helicopter, but it's already being looted by locals, forcing the agents to come up with a new plan. The team attacks their opponents but doesn't have time to escape. They are once again confronted by the leader. This time, everyone understands that there will be no chance to fight back. One of the guards, out of fear, reveals the truth about the visitors. Learning that they are FBI agents, the Somali demands a large ransom to help him take over the country. Janice manages to persuade the leader. She convinces him that their mission is not to start a war, but to prevent one. The Somali helps the group reach one of the towers. Simon examines the structure with surprise, noting that it was built exactly according to his design, but long before he developed it. Dimitri discovers a videotape that has been stored in the tower for 18 years. On the tape, the Somali recognizes his fellow tribesmen, whom he believed died during the first blackout. The agents also identify the experiment's author. It was Dee Gibbons. Exploring the tower's tunnels, the agents find a sealed room where villagers were imprisoned. Judging by the remains, the experiment's participants were killed. The Somali leader is enraged by what he sees and plans to take revenge on the Americans, but Vogel acts faster, leaving the Somali leader lying with his tribesmen. Dimitri reviews the tape again, and the next few seconds shock him. Dee Gibbons from 1991 addresses him by name. The recording is sent to the department. Mark watches the message left by Gibbons many years ago. Following the criminal's clues, Benford deciphers the chess code and dials the phone number that Gibbons left specifically for the agents. Mark arrives at a chess club to meet someone who could help in the search for the scientist, but the only witness has been killed. Benford realizes that there is someone in the department leaking information. To find out who the traitor is, Agent Vogel gathers everyone in the conference room, and a special team searches the employees' offices. A bug is found on Mark's desk. Everyone with access to the office falls under suspicion, creating tension among the colleagues. The agents are most suspicious of Janice. Recently, she has taken many days off, which she struggles to explain, but she deflects suspicion by accusing Marcy, a colleague with family problems. Dimitri reviews the camera footage and notices a pattern. Marcy was signaling with a coffee cup. Mark looks up at the girl and she understands everything. A shootout ensues in the office. Marcy kills her colleagues and runs outside. Her accomplice arrives on a motorcycle to help her escape, but Janice manages to prevent the getaway. Benford receives a call from Dyson Frost. He offers the agent a personal meeting and promises to call back. Janice and Simon head to the underground parking garage where the girl suddenly stops. She tells the scientist that his signal has been received. Her boss is ready to talk to him. Simon realizes that Marcy was just a distraction. The real traitor has always been Hawk. The police inform the feds that a crime was committed the previous night using the stolen gun. Dimitri catches up with Marcy to find out to whom she passed the gun, but she only says that preventing Dimitri's death is impossible. The agents receive a signal that a criminal with Mark's gun is committing a crime in the city center. Dimitri steps forward, trying to distract the guy and persuade him to release the hostage. As soon as the assailant lowers his guard, Dmitri shoots. Despite the successful outcome, there is no relief. The gun in the attacker's possession has a different serial number. Agent Dmitri prepares for his wedding, trying not to think about the future. But while the bride and guests wait for him at the church, Dee Gibbons attacks him at his home. Mark decides to inform his wife about his missing friend, and while she is on the phone, Dee Gibbons sits down next to Charlie. The agents carefully interrogate Charlie, and the girl describes her conversation with the stranger. She also hands over a picture the old man left her. Mark and his colleagues prepare to visit the address that Dee Gibbons provided with the picture. Meanwhile, Dmitri finds himself at the mercy of a gun, which the villain has attached to a special device. The mad scientist enthusiastically tells his hostage about his inventions and plans. He claims that Dmitri's death is his only chance to save his own life. Benford arrives at the designated location. Finally, a teenager approaches the agent and hands him a backpack with a phone. The agent follows all of the criminal's instructions without question to save his friend. He leaves his colleagues behind and, getting into the prepared car, successfully evades pursuit. Dee Gibbons directs Mark along a highway through the countryside. Constantly checking his watch, the agent continues his journey through the mountains. Finally, he spots Dee Gibbons. The old man raises his gun and orders the agent to handcuff himself. Mark distracts the old man and attacks him. He demands that Gibbons take him to Dmitri, but someone no longer wishes to keep the witness alive. The scientist is eliminated. As he dies, he doesn't have time to tell Mark where Dmitri is. The navigator leads Mark to the last known location of Dee Gibbons. Benford bursts into the building and spots his friend. There are less than 2 minutes left before the automatic shot, and Mark tries to solve the scientist puzzle to stop the mechanism. The timer reaches 0 and the gun fires, but by this time, Mark manages to lift the gun and Dmitri survives. As soon as Dmitri gets out of the chair, water washes away the scientist's map, destroying all the evidence and clues. Mark instructs his colleagues to figure out Frost's blueprints and determine how they are connected to the second blackout, which the mad scientist mentioned. A strange man appears at Olivia's house. He babbles incoherently, claiming that the doctor's husband is Lloyd. Meanwhile, Janice delivers Frost's blueprints to a professor of archaeology, but the people for whom the double agent secretly works demand that she steal the originals and hand them over. Hawk is forced to take a risk. She steals the blueprints from the Institute and sneaks into the office to retrieve the last copy from Mark's desk. Benford catches his colleague red-handed, but she manages to talk her way out by inventing a story about lost documents. Mark asks Hawk to come to the office to meet with the professor. The girl realizes that her deception has been uncovered, but Benford postpones the conversation and returns to his discussion with the scientist. According to the old man, the blueprints that Dee Gibbons had were some kind of device for counting down dates. One of them is October 6th, the day of the blackout. Frost's words keep replaying in Mark's mind, and an idea strikes him. He breaks open the large chess piece hanging on the board. Inside, the agent finds a ring with an unknown symbol. Olivia meets Gabriel, the strange man, again. He keeps repeating random nonsensical words, but finally, the woman manages to discern the main point. The guy has been subjected to multiple blackouts, becoming a victim of Frost's experiments. Experts provide the scientists with the results of analyzing Frost's ring, and Simon makes an astonishing discovery. Inside the ring is a device that allowed its wearer to remain conscious during the blackout. Janice meets with her handlers. After failing the mission with the blueprints, she is given one last chance. This time, she must retrieve the ring from the vault and eliminate Benford. On a city bridge, Simon spots his sister. Annabelle delivers a message to her brother. They need him and the ring. Simon has only 12 hours, or else his sister will be killed. Dmitri arrives at a crime scene and learns that someone has been eliminating all those who managed to survive the predicted date of their death in the last 2 weeks. Simon memorizes the safe's code when Lloyd places the ring inside. As soon as the scientist is left alone, he decides to use this opportunity to save his sister. The agents identify the executioner who has been getting rid of all the survivors. It turns out to be Mr. Slingerland. The agents catch the psycho just as he tries to dispose of another victim, but despite all efforts to save her, an agent accidentally hits the girl. Mark discovers a minivan and Annabelle inside. He informs Simon, but it's already too late. The scientist escapes with the ring. The agents investigate Simon and his alibi for the day of the blackout. Using special software, they establish that he was indeed the prime suspect at the baseball stadium. Olivia brings Gabriel to Mark's office to help find clues. According to the madman, Benford's wall is full of errors, and he forces the agent to redo everything according to his notebook. During interrogation, Gabriel says that Frost wasn't the only leader. There was someone much more important, and he will repeat the blackout very soon. The deranged stranger shows a portrait of this person. It turns out to be the man Simon is currently talking to. Gabriel is set to be transferred to a safe house, and Janice informs her handlers about it. The minivan falls into an ambush, but instead of the strange madman, it's Mark disguised inside. But the agent's operation doesn't end there. He manages to infiltrate the villain's lair and capture the leader. Mark realizes who the traitor in their department is, but Janice still doesn't tell the truth. She claims she was only working for the CIA. Benford begins interrogating the main suspect. He wants to know how the villain caused the global blackout, but the scientist is confident that it doesn't matter. Regardless of how the day unfolds, the outcome will be the same. Benford will be dead by nightfall. Dimitri heads to Janice's house and finds Simon there. Hawk sees no other way out. She helps her partner arrest Simon, despite their previous arrangement. Despite warnings, Mark loses control and uses force to find out when the global blackout is planned. Stan realizes that Benford is not in control of himself and orders him to be removed from the office. At 6 in the evening, thousands of people gather in the streets to celebrate April the 29th, the day from the visions. Lloyd arrives at Olivia's house to ensure events unfold correctly, but the woman also decides to change her fate and leaves town with Charlie. Mark's chain of events also changes. He starts a brawl in a bar and ends up in a jail cell. With just over an hour left until the moment of truth, all the characters find themselves in different places, but Stan posts bail for Mark, and everything starts to fall into place. The agents return to the bureau due to a report of planted explosives. At the same time, Lloyd finds Olivia and asks her to return home so they can recreate the evening from their shared memories. The scientist's plan begins to unfold. Dylan writes the formula he saw Lloyd use on the mirror. The FBI building is attacked by masked assailants, but this doesn't stop Mark, and he finds himself in his place at the map with the clues. Simon infiltrates the corporation's server room to hack the computer and prevent another blackout. At the appointed time, Lloyd calls Mark and gives the date of the next blackout, the next 48 hours. Thanks to Gabriel's notebook, Benford learns the exact time. The blackout will happen in 12 minutes. The masked criminals destroy Mark's office and all his work, but the agent survives and tries to fight back. Simon notices that someone has remotely taken control of the program and he cannot stop it. Dimitri suspects the scientist did it on purpose, but Simon swears he is trying to prevent the catastrophe. Mark manages to warn his boss about the next blackout, but he can't get out of the building and is once again surrounded by armed mercenaries. With 30 seconds left before the explosion, Mark runs for the exit, but at that moment the mechanism activates, and the world freezes again, glimpsing into its future. This is where the series ends. And aliens arriving on Earth first kill an entire small town and then bring half of its population back to life, although it's hard to call it life.
We searched for a new home. We found one. This planet.
Somewhere in Pennsylvania, in the small town of Berridge, a family sits down for dinner. Suddenly there is a loud bang outside, the lights go out and people briefly come to their senses before dying. Later on, exobiologist Lauren Stone hears news reports on TV about a powerful explosion in Berridge that killed the entire population of the town, 1,300 people. The air in the settlement is poisoned by some toxic substance, and the theory that the explosion occurred at the local chemical plant becomes increasingly popular. Lauren takes a bath and remembers herself, her father, and a field she used to run through. Her memories are interrupted by the arrival of the military, although Lauren does not quite understand how she can help with the investigation. Colonel Emmerich introduces her to astrobiologist Santiago. Geologists confirmed that the accident was the result of a meteorite impact which released a deadly gas. That's why they were invited to the crash site. The military will be grateful for any evidence they find that can shed light on the nature of the incident. Emmerich assures Lauren that he chose her because he read her work, but asks her to take an alcohol test. Scientists are dressed in protective suits and taken to the meteorite crash site. On the way, Santiago praises her book on microbiology in Antarctica and signs of extraterrestrial life, but the woman doesn't engage in conversation. Arriving at the site, the pair only sees a snowy field and a small pile of ground. While Santiago inspects the area, Lauren notices a small sprout of some red plant and pities it for growing in such a terrible place. Upon arriving home, Lauren begins to search for similar cases and finds mention of a similar incident. In 2013, a meteorite exploded over the city of Chelyabinsk in Russia, and an interview with a local resident was filmed by American television. She recounted that after the meteorite fell, a poisonous gas spread throughout the area, causing many people to die. It was also said that a very large tree grew at the site of the impact, around which all living things died. The tree was cut down and information about the incident was kept secret. In the postscript to the interview, journalists reported that the woman was killed almost immediately after it. The next day, doctors begin to perform an autopsy on the man who died in Burridge, and at first everything looks completely normal. But when the doctor makes an incision, a strange blue liquid begins to seep out, which then returns to the body after a short time and the wound heals. But even more surprising is the resurrection of the man who suddenly sits up on the table and silently looks down, not reacting to the voices of those around him. The man has no pulse or blood pressure and his body is cold. In other words, by all indications, the man is dead. Suddenly there are cries behind the door. It turns out that another 40 people suddenly opened their eyes and came back to life. The doctors tried to get some kind of reaction from the resurrected, but to no avail. They are all residents of the town center who not only inhaled the poisonous gas but also ingested some substance that led to DNA transformation, and the only thing the resurrected do is occasionally turn around. Meanwhile, Lauren tells Emmerich about the Chelyabinsk meteorite. But the people in Russia were also victims, which means that this is someone's terrible plan. But the colonel does not believe in conspiracy theories. Later, a government commission discusses the incident and proposes simply destroying the bodies before it's too late. But to get answers, all the data must be carefully studied, otherwise Manhattan could be next. Later, the woman buys alcohol and drinks it while sitting in the car, reminiscing about a trip she took with her father to a secret place. The next day, Lauren goes to a room where the revived people are sitting and selecting a girl tells her about a book her mother used to read to her when she was a child, who has long since passed away. At that moment, her phone rings and a photo of the red plant from the scene of the incident appears on the screen, and the girl suddenly grabs Lauren's hand. The woman tells her colleagues about this and suggests that the plant is to blame. Santiago notices that all the survivors are looking in one direction, to the north, where the crash site is located. And then the colonel confesses that they found a sapling, but they don't know what it is because the plant is huge and continues to grow. The thing is that the area is sealed off and the plant was only noticed when it became visible from a distance. It turns out that it wasn't a meteorite that fell on the ground, but a huge seed. A team of scientists is sent to the site, taking one of the revived with them. They bring him to an unimaginably huge tree on a cart and watch from a distance, but he remains motionless. And when people have lost all hope, the man in the wheelchair suddenly moves, raises his head, looks in surprise at his hands and the snow under his feet. And then he admits that he can't survive in the Earth's environment, so he will stay here. Upon returning, Lauren reports that the tree is generating the necessary environment for its survival, including the air that is toxic to humans. The aliens arrived on Earth through special portals that scientists call wormholes. She is bombarded with questions, revealing that she has had problems with alcohol and prohibited substances. Later, a psychotherapist calls her answering machine, who was waiting for her at the session as part of his sentence. They were supposed to discuss her childhood memories that are haunting her, but she didn't show up. At that moment, her father shows up at the door, but Lauren is not pleased to see him. He tries to start the conversation and recalls how on her 8th birthday she asked for a scientific laboratory and they gave her an old barn. However, her obsession with space spiraled out of control and her mother became worried. Sometime later, the colonel summons Lauren again. The alien wants to speak, but only with her, as he sees her as a friend. They have prepared a list of questions and ask her to find out where they came from and why they came. The alien explains that their home is no longer suitable for their species. They were searching for a new home and found it using coordinates received from a human with the call sign Supernova 94. From that same human, the aliens learned all the strengths and weaknesses of humans. The alien asks the military to leave, and Lauren admits that the tree will soon destroy everything as it is harming the planet. The alien then says that humans will not be able to stop them because they are used to fighting and they have abilities. And here Santiago starts acting strangely. He drops his suitcase and begins to unzip his protective suit. The military personnel try to contain him, but they cannot do anything. The man falls to the ground and tears the hose from the mask of a soldier who was trying to help him. The soldier removes his useless mask and dies. Then one of the soldiers suggests shooting the alien. and just then they are hit by a sound attack that drives them crazy and they open fire on each other. One of the survivors takes stunned Lauren away. Later, a fighter jet armed with missiles is sent to the tree. The pilots see a small figure of a person at the base of the tree and receive orders to attack the target. But suddenly an impenetrable dome covers the tree. The missiles explode, causing no harm to the tree. Meanwhile, the news reports that the FBI is searching for a person with the nickname Supernova 94 who seems to be responsible for the expansion. People around the world tell stories about strange sounds that occasionally come from unknown sources. In some places, smoke emerges from the ground, killing all living things. People pray day and night, and martial law has been imposed in many countries. The earth trembles, crops die, and vegetables rot in the ground. One day, Lauren goes to her father's house, but first she approaches the locked barn, which has a sign that reads Lauren's Laboratory. But after looking at the house, she walks away and heads towards the tree. For many years, she has been tormented by the question of who or what she is. The end of the world is approaching, but she feels relief, as if she will finally live freely. And she plans to find the truth right here. She meets the alien who tells her that the tree is undergoing transformation. Feeling the tremble under her feet, Lauren lies down on the ground and listens to the hum of the planet. The time has come, new life is growing, and all of this has happened because of her. And finally, Lauren remembers the day when her father brought her to a secret base where an unidentified flying object had been brought down. Her father left her to wait in the corridor. Bored, she wandered through the rooms, listening to her father being instructed about a powerful and hostile creature that had tried to plant something before it was shot down by the military. The girl found the sarcophagus containing the alien and reached out to the glass. Suddenly, the creature reached out and touched the glass from the other side. She screamed in terror, not understanding what strange thing was happening to her, causing her to lose consciousness. The frightened guard found her and took her to her father. But the girl looked healthy and left with her father. Only from that day on, Lauren hasn't been quite herself. She draws super complex designs of interstellar ships and writes incomprehensible formulas. At school, she constantly gets in trouble, skillfully manipulating not only her classmates but also her teachers, calling herself an alien who wants to go home. And one day, Lauren tunes a transmitter she has built and contacts a distant planet, taking the call sign Supernova 94. Her parents are horrified and forbid her from entering the laboratory. Lauren smashes toys, draws on walls, and tells her mother the date of her death. It is then that her father learns of her new DNA. The girl seems to be changing, becoming something other than human. Adult Lauren sobs in horror at her discovery, but the alien welcomes her home and she remembers telling the distant planet all about Earth. Meanwhile, mysterious X-shaped objects begin to appear all over the planet. They emerge everywhere, in forests and cities, deserts and mountains. And one day they suddenly explode, spreading black smoke that kills all life around them. And no one can hide or survive as the roots have already penetrated the entire Earth. The planet is no longer suitable for the human race. All earthly species and plants have been extinct. The evolution of a new species has begun, and Lauren's journey has come to an end. She's finally home. And this is where the movie ends. A young man returns home and discovers on the carpet in the living room his own body. Next to it lies an envelope with the inscription, "Look at me." The initial shock is replaced by curiosity as Alex finds a flash drive in the envelope, which he immediately plugs into his computer and on the screen sees just himself. The second, Alex reassures himself he is not high and has not gone insane and advises to listen carefully. Thus, it all started with men in black coming to his house. Rebecca, an employee of a private scientific research institute of advanced technologies which cooperates with the National Security Agency of the USA, has a very tempting offer for Alex. But first, Alex must sign non-disclosure agreement, for which Rebecca offers a check for a substantial amount. Having signed the papers, Alex learns the story of an American unregistered satellite which the USA did not launch. Strangely enough to admit, the satellite is allegedly from the future and contains a coded message inside. If Alex agrees, he will be put to sleep and delivered to the laboratory. The institute knows that he is practically bankrupt and lives in a house inherited from his parents. To prove the seriousness of her intentions, Rebecca immediately transfers a large sum to Alex's account, which convinces him to sign the documents. The next day, he is put in a car, given an injection, after which he falls asleep and only comes to his senses in a closed, secret place. Rebecca shows him the laboratory where the satellite is already located. And the guy starts solving the task. 5 weeks pass, but there are no results yet. Rebecca suggests Alex take a day off, but the guy does not need it. One day he is visited by a vision in which a young woman decodes the same task. After that, Alex bleeds from his nose. Later he finds the name of this woman written on the frame of the bed. Soon, Alex manages to decrypt part of the code, which contains drawings of an unknown device. Rebecca announces the end of his work and informs him that he will be taken home. Alex comes to his senses at home late at night. He feels ill, which he attributes to fatigue and stress. But after a few days, the malaise intensified, and he began to be haunted by persistent hallucinations. And one day, 2 strange-looking men appear on the threshold of his house, wanting to know why he agreed to decrypt the code. Alex does not understand because decryption is just his job, which pays well. The men continue to press Alex with questions about morality. Don't the consequences of his work bother him, since the device to be created from the decrypted drawings will be the most powerful weapon in the world? Alex's head starts to hurt, and he asks the men to leave. They thank him for the answers and leave. Alex immediately feels better and sits down at the computer, but at that moment, a call comes from Rebecca, reminding him of the signed non-disclosure agreements. An indignant Alex realizes that the Institute is watching him, and when he again sits down at the computer in his house, the lights go out. Alex goes outside and suddenly sees one of the 2 men who came to him with questions on the opposite side of the street, but the man's body starts growing before his eyes. Frightened, Alex runs home and looks out the window to see the giant's hand reaching for his window. Alex extends his hand to meet it, and morning comes. Rebecca, who has arrived, finds Alex at work. He tries to explain that humanity lives in 2-dimensional space, and his recent guests are a highly developed civilization that exists not only in space but also in time. They can be in this room but earlier or later, and they can watch what is happening through some kind of window in time. Alex tries to convey to Rebecca the danger of the device they are building, which can start World War III. Then the woman informs him that she knows about his illness, a brain tumor. The guy blames the Institute, which placed him in a room with a radioactive satellite, causing a tumor to develop in his brain, and insists on stopping the construction of the device. Alex, in the present, pulls his dead body out of the house and buries it in the forest, then returns to the computer and continues to listen to the story from his future self. Alex, in the future, regrets that they did not want to listen to him because he understood that something ominous was coming. Then he remembers the woman. She is cryptographer. Alex finds her address, but Beth refuses to talk to him. Alex shouts that he is dying. He has 6 months left. After that, Beth opens the doors and informs that she has 2 years left. She also realized that it was a weapon, and the drawings supposedly came from the future. There is another person, Schieferman, who communicates with her through the computer and sends her tasks, which she solves when she feels normal. Beth starts feeling unwell, so a man takes her to the bedroom, while he goes downstairs, where it seems like he sees the girl's life in the mirrors. There she is, saying goodbye to her beloved in military uniform. There his comrades inform her of terrible news, and there she is with a handful of pills in her hand, trying to leave this life. But then his attention is captured by a message from Schieferman appearing on the computer monitor. Alex responds, but Schieferman quickly realizes that it's not Beth and disconnects. The man then grabs a pack of printed papers with tasks previously given by Schieferman. In the morning, Beth finds him on her sofa, with the papers glued together. The guy points out to her that all this are pieces of a puzzle which, when assembled, can give an answer. Schieferman clearly doesn't work at the Institute. Alex asks Beth to help stop the creation of a death machine. The girl reports that she fell ill specifically after working with the satellite. She started having hallucinations and began thinking about a message from the future. What if it's possible to contact the sender? She began to hear the voices of the dead and one day heard her own voice. She also saw aliens, though she doesn't believe in them, and asks Alex to leave. Alex goes home, where people in black are waiting for him. Rebecca orders him not to meet with Beth anymore and urges him to use the remaining time wisely. Angered, the guy sends the guests to hell, and upon entering the house discovers that all his papers with conclusions have disappeared. Meanwhile, Beth sees a bright light at her house, which makes her feel sick. The woman screams in fear and tries to hide. Alex tries to drown his thoughts in alcohol when a message from Schefferman arrives on his computer. The guy is sure that Rebecca is hiding behind this nickname, but the interlocutor denies it. At that moment, the doorbell rings. Beth is on the threshold. It turns out that Schefferman directed Beth here and sent her the blueprints of a device capable of destroying the technology from the future. The couple begins developing a virus capable of destroying the machine being created from the blueprints they decrypted through the computer. But the next morning, Rebecca bursts into Alex's house. Representatives of the Institute know about their work and are already on their way there. She gives the name of the Institute's founder and orders to go to him as soon as possible. She is Schefferman and hope to destroy the device with their help. Then cars approach Alex's house. The couple escapes through the back exit. Rebecca is caught, given an injection, and thrown into a car. Meanwhile, all the gas burners in the kitchen are opened. In the evening, Alex and Beth arrive at scientist Miles, who immediately recognizes both of them, as he has always followed their work. The thing is, this satellite was not the only one. There was another, which orbited Earth for about 400 years. Apparently, unknown beings from the future were waiting for Earthlings to grow up, fly into space, and be able to decrypt their message. The ancient satellite also contained blueprints of a machine whose purpose was to limit the evolution of humanity within the third dimension. But when Miles announced his discovery, he was laughed at. He also developed a tumor, luckily not fatal. He is sure that aliens are capable of existing in several dimensions. They do not perceive time in a linear form as humans do. And the second device, which is now being created at the Institute, will likely provide them access to the human dimension. So far, they are like watching a videotape where humans are movie characters. With the help of the first device, they can watch this movie but cannot change what is happening. But the second will allow changing the existing reality. Miles is just beginning to understand the essence of this process, but cannot explain everything completely. After all, even the appearance of the aliens is formed by the human brain itself. And by the way, he has been in contact with a huge alien visible only to him, living in his garden for more than 30 years. Miles constantly looks at it, causing his brain to adapt and begin to see the true appearance of the humanoid. But his guests see no one. Miles is sure that the tumor in their heads is the aliens' help so that people could perceive their reality. Alex suggests simply smashing the device with a hammer, but where is the guarantee that they will not restore it in the Institute? So all data on the server needs to be erased, although no one even knows the location of the Institute. But Miles reminds that he is one of its founders, and he pulls out a map with a detailed plan of the Institute. At that moment, a loud bang is heard at the door. The couple runs away, while Miles tries to calm down the raging alien. Alex and Beth hit the road and soon find the Institute's building, where they open a hatch through which they sneak inside. There they separate to increase the chances of finding the laboratory. Alex witnesses the strange behavior of a guard who constantly returns backward and realizes that time inside the Institute is looped. Beth also falls into this loop. Realizing the futility of her attempts to go further, the girl activates the bomb. But because of the time loop, she is unable to leave the dangerous place. Alex goes into a dark room and tries to carry the bomb further when he is overtaken by an alien and literally disintegrates the man into small particles. A minute later, Alex finds himself tied to a table. Opposite him sits a humanoid. Alex thinks he has died, but the alien denies his belief. They are simply curious about the human appearance and their experience of time. Linear time for aliens is incomprehensible and tedious, a labor-intensive cycle of empty beliefs. Humans are like in a trap, forced to constantly go through the same thing. Aliens, on the other hand, exist outside of time and space. They are in every moment. Therefore, causal connection and sequence of actions for them is a mystery. What will happen if a human no longer has to wait for something? Alex realizes humans will become similar to the appearance of aliens, but the familiar personality, the ego, dies in the moment. The alien is surprised. Death is natural, but man hides and distances himself from it. Time determines everything for a human. It is both a giver and a thief. A human sees the world as he imagined it, and what will happen when the source of projection disappears. Even with the eternity of self-analysis, man will not understand the difference between reality and illusion. With each newly born, a new reality comes. Therefore, a person always stands before choice. Alex feels very bad, And then the alien offers to return to the moment before the guy got sick, with the information he now has. Alex decides that he would not have gone to work at the Institute and would have stopped all this. The alien is surprised. Why would he change his behavior if he's not able to change the situation? And then Alex admits, people do not choose what will happen. The humanoid insists, will his return to the past make a difference? Can something change? And immediately, the guy finds himself in his home, in front of the computer. He records this flash drive, realizing that nothing can be changed. The world may disappear tomorrow, but this is not news. Everything has already happened. Everything ended before it began. He puts the flash drive in an envelope and falls to the floor. The last words on the flash drive are about Alex in the past, warning Beth, and he drives to the girl's house, while Alex from the future, in his last words, asks to forget about everything and live on. Quite an interesting movie that makes you think, what if the concept of time really does not exist, and we live only here and now in one single moment? Who made us believe that there is a past and a future? And is it true that a person does foolish things, not thinking about how his thoughts and actions change his own future? Friends, write your opinion in the comments.